History laid the foundation
that informs our conversation. Welcome to the classroom.
from the church to the streets, and even in the suites, and all around the world. I'm gonna keep it real in the classroom. Fannie Lou's classroom. Fannie Lou's classroom. Fannie Lou's classroom.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in for another episode of Fannie Lou's Classroom. And like most Thursdays, we hope that you receive a different kind of lunch meal during this 12 to 1 o'clock hour, as we always try to do our best to have conversations that really deal with issues that are relevant, current, and very critical to our surviving and thriving in our current social political context. So we're excited to be here on today. Despite everything that's going on around us, we still believe in hope. We still believe in that hope is transformative. And so we're going to have a conversation on today just about, the state of faith, democracy, in the future. So it's going to be a conversation with a returning guest who has been here before, who really needs no introduction. My friend and my brother, the Reverend Dameon Madison, is in the house on today.
What's going on?
So I'll just say, most recently, Reverend Madison served as the pastor of stewardship here at Friendship West Baptist Church. And of course, he's been in ministry, since I've known you. And before I met you, you were already in ministry. So as he was saying in his bio, right, he has possessed a heart for ministry for a long time. As far as back as you can remember, you've been faithful to that calling. So we so appreciate your work and your witness. And most recently, we've been working together because you are the project manager for the Better Together initiative at the Martin Luther King Center for Nonviolent Social Change, as we call it, the King Center in Atlanta, Georgia. So let's welcome back to the show Reverend Dameon Madison. And you can read his full bio if you click on the description for this particular podcast. And of course, I got to shout out Brooke Mosley. She's always quiet in the cut, making it happen from week to week. Then, of course, Cheryl's still holding it down solo. Well, we work together, but she holds the weight, making sure we're ready to go from week to week, doing research and, coming up with questions that we might want to throw out there for our guests. And so I think I want to start off this way. So, Reverend, start off this way. Just kind of tell us where you are in this moment and what you kind of see happening in our current social political context. And then we'll kind of jump into, I'm going to do some reading today.
All right.
We're in the classroom, so we're going to read today in class as a way, I think, for us to get people to kind of understand just the very subtle, that some of it is subversive, right? Mm-hmm. But some of it is very much in front of our faces. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's also about how do we may not know what's happening because we are not inclined to kind of see and follow, right, the systematic way that democracy is being dismantled. As I say, Ecclesiastes say everything there's a season. Mm-hmm. I say we're in the season of destruction right now. Mm-hmm. And so we have to resist that. So just kind of tell us, where you are in this moment.
First, thank you so much for having me again. I always love being here at Fannie Lou's Classroom. I guess to begin, it's really an attempt to stay sane in a crazy world, right? Because what we're experiencing right now is diabolical, it's malevolent, it lacks a heart for humanity, and ultimately it is a grab for power that benefits, to be direct, white men in particular, right, and to also lift up capitalism in a way that benefits, those who are the top 1% in our country. Now, the reality is, though, that what we're experiencing is not a momentary happening, right? This just didn't happen overnight. This has been in play since 1964, 65, and I would even argue before that, really, because this country has always had an affinity for leaning into whiteness, for leaning into misogyny, for leaning into racism, for leaning into oppression. And so, the idea of diversity, the idea of equity, the idea of inclusion has always been in conflict in our country. because it does put at risk those who have been in power and those who desire to remain in power. And so where I am in this space, one is I am in awe because, wow, this is actually happening for real. And when I say this is happening, we are watching a shift in our country in a major way. And to use your words, it is actually a deconstruction of democracy in real talk. And so, and so as much as I'm in awe, but I'm also I'm accepting of the reality of where we are, right? And it is the fact that this is, to quote Eddie Glaude, this is who we've always been.
Yes.
This is who we are.
That's it.
And so I think we have to move and to adopt that reality. Now, but thirdly, I'm in awe, I'm accepting, but at the same time, I'm also I'm encouraged in the sense that there are some things we can do. I think there's some things that we should do, but we have to first, again, take the step in admitting that we need to do something.
Yes. So I think that's excellent. Thank you for where you ended. 'Cause I'm going to pick up on that, right? Because you said we must do something. And so as I was mentioning earlier before we, went live, I picked up this really small short book, and it's called On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century by Timothy Snyder. So I want to talk about number 2.
Okay.
Right? So number 2 is defend institutions. It is institutions that help us to preserve to preserve decency. They need our help as well. Do not speak of our institutions, in quotes, unless you make them yours by acting on their behalf. Institutions do not protect themselves. They fall one after the other unless each is defended from the beginning. So choosing institutions you care about, a court, a newspaper, we'll get to that, a law, a labor union, and take its side. Right? So he's saying we tend to assume that institutions will automatically maintain themselves against even the most direct attacks. Then he goes on to say, the mistake is to assume that rulers who came to power through institutions cannot change or destroy those very institutions, even when that is exactly what they have announced that they will do. So, right. So I think let's talk a little bit, because, I always talk about the importance of insurance. I always talk about we got to build institutional power, like political. You have to institutionalize not just the work, but also the frameworks in which you do the work, so that when one person passes along, the next person can pick. You're not starting from scratch, which speaks to. We talk about, you said 64 and 65, how different iterations of the mandate for leadership, right? So Project 2025 as the definitely most direct attack, right, in an iteration of the mandate for leadership. So let's talk about that. Defending these institutions everything, like exactly what he is saying is what we see unfolding in real time. So how do we get people to understand, like, what is it you care about? And how do you then join movements to defend that institution? Because we have to preserve that in the way, because institutions, one, they survive people. That's why they're important. Number 2, it allows us to have structure, right? It allows us to build policies that, kind of dictate how resources are distributed. Institutions allow us to pass laws that kind of govern our behaviors that make for, we hope to be a just, equitable society. But who sits in those seats really determines that, right? Which is what he's saying. And so talk to us about, 1, how we must defend, and number 2, what those who may have felt like, oh, he's not going to do all that. He can't, because that's what he's saying. We just assume institutions can't be destroyed from within, right? And because people threaten to do it doesn't mean they can, because this institution's been there for 100 years, 200 years. So kind of talk to us about what defending can look like and what people can do.
I'll start answering on this way. One of the things that we have to do is, 1, do a better job at educating our populace and really understanding what are our institutions, right, and why they exist. One of the things that I think we are void of in our current culture and climate is we just don't know how things work. And I do argue that's by design, right? We've heard it before. When we grew up, we had schoolhouse rock.
Right.
And so we knew how Bill went to Capitol Hill, and so we learned this stuff as kids growing up, and even growing up, we had social studies and civics classes, and so you learned how and why we had institutions, and how the system that we live in works. And so there was a sense of understanding. And so which out of that, you recognize the history behind it. And we also hear this. We're also void of knowing our history as a country as well. And so we don't recognize and don't know that the reason that we even the American experiment was even founded was to escape the very thing you just read about.
Right.
And so we're trying to escape something that we're becoming. Right. And so so I think we have to recognize and know the history and know what and why our institutions exist. And then parallel to that, we also have to recognize and know why do our Black institutions exist, right? Our Black institutions were not birthed because we wanted to be a part. We didn't birth HBCUs because we wanted HBCUs. We didn't birth the Black church because we wanted to have. We had no choice. We weren't accepted. We weren't. So we couldn't go to a white church and be treated humanely and be respected. We couldn't go to white institutions. I just read last week a copy of a letter that a Black student wrote to Emory. And it was in mid 50s,
right?
And was denied even application,
right?
Because he was African American, and they even returned his application fee. They didn't even want his money, and so we had to create Meharry, and other institutions because we had no choice. And so when we look at that, we have to build and safeguard our systems and places and spaces. One, to have a safe space where we can exist humanely, in a world that does not honor and respect difference and diversity. And at the same time, we also have to navigate, maintaining institutions and defending institutions within our government. So we have a legal recourse to work through and navigate to help safeguard and protect our humanity. And so now what we're watching right now is the dismantling of that very system, that very infrastructure that we have been able to use historically to argue for our humanity. And so now we're in a quagmire here because we used to be able to go to court, right? And there was a judge that would hear our case, on why we need to have civil rights and why we need to have equitable access. But now we're in a space where we have courts and judges who are so far right leaning, where that argument may not work anymore. And so how do we navigate a space where institutions will fail us in this time?
So to your point, why we have the Black church, why we have our Black institutions, I think, right, we did them out of necessity without question, right? But I'm also saying, how do we also uphold, support our own Black institutions? A while back, it may have been season 4, maybe season 3, we had Reverend Dameon Durr. And we talked about, I can't remember the brother's name of the book he wrote, but it was about, HBCUs, but he's also talking about the strength of our institutions and what we must do. So it's also the case, they don't want you to know about our institutions more broadly. One, what they do, what they don't do, how they function. Right? Because now that's why you have people saying, well, yeah, get rid of that department. They don't do this. Get rid of that. Well, you don't even know the extent of the work that's being done. It's not. So they say clean out Washington. We know people who are laid off, people who are being forced out are not in D.C. They're in all parts of the country. Like the government extends out through your state, through your county, down to your municipal level. So we're not understanding it. So now people are looking around like, oh, I'm being laid off, but I don't even work in D.C. But that's the play, right? Is to do that. So I think, and I think it's also this idea of, so one, yes, understand how our institutions are structured, the functionality of those institutions, and then the importance of us maintaining that, but also challenging too, because sometimes it's about challenging institutions to be more just and equitable. But that doesn't mean some of them I do believe, let's take the carceral state, for example, like that totally has to be destroyed just in terms of just how, unjust it is. But I think what we have to not do is, and this is, I'm going to go back to his first lesson, because I think many of us are doing this consciously and unconsciously, and that is what he calls don't obey in advance. So I think we see what's happening, we may feel like, oh, there's nothing I can do, I'll just kind of see what happens, right? So what he's saying on this, as it relates to defending the institution, part of that means that you can't just give over your power in advance of understanding what's to come. Right, so he says this about that. Most of the power of authoritarianism is freely given. In times like these, individuals think ahead about what a more repressive government will want, and then they offer themselves without being asked. A citizen who adapts this way of teaching behaving is teaching power what it can do. Right, so he said anticipatory obedience is a political tragedy. And I think sometimes that's a lot of what we're doing, which allows for our institutions, what's happening to them now, the complete destruction, and then also the missteps, right? So you fire, I think it was a nuclear piece, right? So you fire everybody. Oh, wait a minute, we need them. But then they couldn't get in touch with them because they didn't have the information. What does that mean for our safety? Like, people have to begin to think real serious about what he's saying. And because we don't know, we just hear whatever we hear and see, we believe it. And so we're thinking, he's cleaning out DC. And by the whole time, of course, Elon Musk is getting $1 gazillion in tax breaks, right? And contracts.
Right.
While you're worried about some over here getting a EBT card.
Right.
Getting Medicaid coverage for their child. Right? Medicare coverage, et cetera, right? So I think that's part of what we have to, one, not give over our power so easily or feel helpless. Yeah. Right. I think it was last episode or episode before last, we talked about how you don't, I think it was with Deirdre that we're going to be with in Selma, where we talked about don't give your power over. You have to connect with others. But first, what are you passionate about? That's what I'm saying. What institution do you really feel needs preserving that you feel we need to have? And how do you then link up with people who are doing that work? Because we don't do it, isolated or by ourselves. And so I can't underscore like what you're saying, like we created those out of necessity, but at the same time, we know what those institutions meant for us and did for us. Yeah. So I'm wondering how we also go back to some of these, even going back to creating our own mutual aid and beneficial societies, right? How do we kind of get back to that kind of work? It probably look different in these days, but I feel it's still necessary for us to really consider in light of what's happening. So all these people getting laid off from their jobs, it's going to be a lot of us. So how are we preparing, right, to really walk alongside folks like that who experience this sudden loss of job, thinking, well, there's no way they're going to just fire all these people. Right. And are right. That are actually doing that. So, I think, wow, you said a lot. I want to start here. I think one of the things we have to be able to step back and do, and I'm going to lean into some Kingian philosophy here for a moment, is we have to be able to step back and look at the interconnectedness of everything that's going on. And that's where I think we suffer. The right-wing conservative party has done a great job at messaging. And so, again, no matter how malevolent, how evil it may have, it is, how diabolical it is in nature, it's still very effective. And so what's happening is they're dismantling or disrupting the idea of institution. Right. And so you have an entire cadre of people who no longer believe in the institution itself because of effective messaging. And so they don't even understand, to your point, the impact of what's happening now, those families who are being disrupted, how people are losing jobs in spaces that
that they had no idea they would, and so because the messaging has been so effective that they have otherized it.
Yeah.
Right. It's going to be those other people who'll be affected. It'll be those those black people. It'll be those women. Those LGBTQ plus folks. That be affected. And so they have done a great job in otherizing people where those who are in support of this thing have centered themselves, and so. And they here it is. They think the institution is the problem,
Right.
and so again, you're able to dismantle it from the inside out through messaging because they don't understand and know, and then you combine that with lack of understanding of how government works. So then you're disrupting the entire system now. Now again, some things should be critiqued. It should be challenged again, but then beyond that, what happens is. You have people who are willfully ignorant, who are choosing ignorance because of racial animus, and so their racial animus has them blind to what's happening because for them, them folk are the problem. It's them. It's these unqualified folk who came in through DEI,
Right.
and so they have raised DEI as a moniker of all things problem. Right. And so you have that. So now and then conversely, what has happened, and sadly to say, that messaging has been also effective within the black community as well, where we are questioning the value of our own institutions. We are questioning the value of the black church. We are questioning the value of HBCUs. We are questioning the value and even the purposefulness of DEI. Because here it is, we have become comfortable and complacent in convenience. And so we think we no longer need these things. And because we don't know the history behind why we have them in the first place.
Right.
And so we don't know that has been DEI that made someone read your resume when your name is Shaniqua. Yeah. We don't know that it's DEI that kept you from getting laid off. It's been DEI that if you're in a wheelchair, while you have access to the job. Right. And so I shift from using the acronym to using the words: diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think we have to use those words as much as we can because it's not an acronym. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so then we have black folk who don't think the black church is needed anymore. Right. When that has been our safe space that we have used and navigated for social progress, right? Now, I will argue now, and I got to be fair, that we do have too many black church spaces who are absent from the conversation.
Right.
That we have adopted such a westernized, Europeanized theology that we are co-conspirators in oppression, and so we gotta have an honest conversation. And so I can understand someone saying, "Well, why?" When you are not doing anything for our community. I gotta be fair, I get it, but by and large, we have to honor the institution, but we are suffering from, again, an impact of evil messaging, but also a void of understanding.
And so, man, you said a lot. Yep. So I'm gonna start here, then I'm gonna end here. So part of the strategy, to your point, the messaging, is to, and I'm gonna read this. It's been circulating a lot lately. The LBJ quote, right? When he says, if you can convince the lowest white man that he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. He'll give you somebody to look down. Hell, give him somebody to look down on, and he'll empty his pockets for you. And that is what we're seeing, right? Because this is, and you can insert here, if you convince not just the lowest white man, but the other non-whites. Yep. Right? Because the other non-whites have, in their mind, right, they're above black folks in America. So, right, that's why you now have the Venezuelans doing press conferences around, what he mean he deporting us? He didn't tell us he's going to deport us. Now you have, some of the Palestinian folk who were like, we're not going to vote for Kamala and genocidal Joe. Right? We're going to withhold our vote. Now, and then in one, on Instagram, I don't know if you saw it, was just literally going off on black folk, right? Saying he wasn't voting for that black B and blah, 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 and then he came back. He's like, where are y'all black folks? Why y'all not out here? Where are you? So I'm saying, so it's also that quote updated means if you convince the lowest white men, but also the other non-whites who not black, right? That it's them, and that's what's catching people up. To your point, oh yeah, DEI, yeah, get rid. Oh, but you forgot to admit diversity, equity, and inclusion, just like Obamacare.
Yep.
See, call Obamacare because I hate Obama. That's a bad thing. But now you got healthcare coverage under the Affordable Care Act. That's why I stopped calling it Obamacare.
Yep.
I always called it what it was. And so to that point, I'm saying
Back in school, let's go. Let's go.
So this book is so good. It's just so to the point, right? So this is the 9th lesson. Be kind to our language. Avoid pronouncing the phrases everyone else does. Think up your own way of speaking, even if only to convey that thing you think everyone is saying. Make the effort to separate yourself from the internet. Read books. And then he goes on to say, more than a half century ago, the classic novels of totalitarianism warned of the domination of screens, the suppression of books, the narrowing of vocabularies, and the associated difficulties of thoughts. It's a playbook.
Yeah.
Right? This is all intentional to your point. So when you said, no, I start saying diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because see, now that's not just, that's ADA, that's veterans, right? That it gets bigger. The pool gets bigger, right? And so that's what's, to me, I'm like, these are some of the things we have to understand and begin to do, right? Recap your language. Language is always critical and important. What you say, how you say, and don't keep repeating something you keep hearing. That's what most people do. They're just repeating what they've seen in the news, right? Yeah. Now you look at Jeff Bezos with Washington. Now I was never subscribed to the Washington Post. So I didn't have to unsubscribe. But like the Washington Post, how he's switching that editorial section up now, right? And I've seen some people on Facebook saying, I now cancel my subscription, which is the stuff we have to do. Because now we're moving closer and closer to state-ran media.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Well,
right.
I would even argue that we've been there for a while. And I say that because when you look at how we obtain our information now, most of us function in echo chambers, right? Like, and it's really interesting. I was watching a special a while back, and there's a journalist who spent 24 hours only watching and reading and consuming conservative media for entire 24 hours. And when he came back, his report was, they live in an entirely different world. And so when you do that, because we largely employ social media for our information, the algorithm decides what we see.
Right.
If we watch, if we just watch one lens on media, that determines what we see, what we read, right? And so now, who's behind that? Big money, right? And so so again, I think we've already been there. And so when you're in those spaces of your algorithm, your echo chamber, all that, you don't even recognize the impact that some policy has because you're only hearing one side of it. Like I think one of the most dangerous things that happened to us in media is when Reagan repealed the Fairness and Information Act, where news were required to report both sides of the story.
Yeah.
Both sides. And once that was done away with, now you can just paint any lens you want to. And so we have people now, and again, I'm extending some grace here, because we have people now who just don't know what's going on in the world because of what they how they garner their information. And which is dangerous because they're arguing with what they think is fact. Right? And so, but then when you come to them with opposing information, when you offer them truth that challenges their footing, now their entire world is disrupted because, okay, I've been grounded in this thing for years, and you tell me that I'm wrong? No, so then there's information grief, because now my first response and reaction to you, because I'm grieving what I thought I knew, is one, I'm getting defensive. I'm angry. We're gonna fight because you are disrupting what I thought I knew. But then after that, the anger. Then you go into deflection, right? So we're in that space, and I think that to that point, messaging, use of words, and to use sacred text. Wow, text. Power of life and death is in your tongue, right? So I think we can learn from that, right?
Yeah.
Is what we say, what we do, how we engage, the messaging that we use, the words that we use can influence a lot and shift a lot.
A lot. And I think to your point, that before, you're right. So you can hear both sides of a story. You can tune into Fox all day or CNN all day or MS. Like you can tune into these various news sites, right? But I think more and more now what you're going to get is going to be one side of the story.
Right.
It's going to be one narrative. And we see this with the MSNBC shakeup.
Right.
So everybody's like,
gosh.
oh, her. Now I'm talking about Joy Reid. Like her numbers were low. So now, and I love how I think it was Higher Heights or Black Women posted all the Black women who have been let go from MSNBC. And I forgot all about Sister Melissa Harris Perry. She was the first one, right?
Yep.
You had Tiffany Cross. I mean, and it just kept going on and on.
Yeah.
And so clearly that's the direction it's going in. And I'm just wondering how long Simone is going to make it. 'Cause I don't see her shifting how boldly she talks, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out as well. But also to your point, no, I want to go back. I'm going to come back to your last point because I just remembered something I had to pull up to make sure I had my facts right. So going back to not giving over your power in advance, not conceding in advance, and resisting, right? So when that U.S. Department of Agriculture suspended the 1890 scholarship program that we know benefits a lot of our land grant and our A&M colleges. Land grant universities. Land grant universities. So they reversed that, right? Because apparently there was some kind of, backlash. So I'm saying people need to pay attention to those things to show it's really all a test, right? To see how far they can go. Everything is trying to say, okay, we do this, what they're going to do. Oh, well, we can go a little bit. And that's the whole point of this book, on tyranny, as he looks at the ways in which Hitler came to power. Right. And I don't know, I forgot the number thing. I think what they said was like so many months, days and hours that it took Hitler to completely usurp, right, the power structure there. And so this is, it's playing out. This is not new, right? We have to be able to see what is really happening in real time but it's going to become more difficult if people already didn't read and they depend on this for everything. Right. Because now they're going to really skew the media where nobody's going to have two sides of a story. So now, and I think that's part of the plan is to make sure you got a question.
Just a statement that, even from now the White House is controlling the press and who actually can get in to, one, follow him around the country, around the world, and then just the regular briefing. So again, it's getting even more narrow as to how and who is going to report information and the perspective from which they will deliver that information.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and so we heard about the reversal in their decision to suspend the program, but what happens when we can't hear about the small victories, right? To see that the resistance is necessary. That's my thing. And then where then can this goes back to institutions. Where then does our Black press pick up? How do we turn to our Black press? And where our Black press picks up on these things, look, we got to find new ways to push this out to community. So we're not ignorant.
Yeah. I think that two thoughts come to mind. One, to your point earlier, that this has been part of one overarching plan, right? And so it began with book bans, right? So then you ban any discussion about accurate African American history, right? And so the less and less you know about what has happened before, the less likely you are to recognize what's happening right now, right? And so we've had that attack happen, and so I think part of where our Black institutions matter right now is that we should be the purveyors of that truth. We should be the ones holding classes and workshops and seminars that unpack and share the accurate telling of our history. That's our job, right? Now, so we're watching that shift. Now, the concern I have, and I have to admit, while we must turn to Black media at this point, one thing we have to fight for is make sure that Black media has access to cover, has access to gain information.
Right.
So, which means we have to make sure that now's the time where we rally around and show up for our officials who we have voted for and elected. We have to rally around our Crockett's and our AOCs and
Right.
those, and really make sure that, again, that we can keep having access to tell the story.
Right, because that's where that would come from, right? If we are in constant communication, because they are still they're still part of the institution, right?
Yeah.
They still can report out on what's happening. And I was looking at Justin Jones in the Tennessee legislature, where he called, he's calling out his colleagues, right, for their racism, for their misogyny, for their hypocritical ways in which they govern in the state of Tennessee. And, Brother Justin Pearson, I know recently how he held it down at when Memphis City Schools was going through that whole debacle with getting rid of the superintendent, and just how he even had to look at, the black police officers who were really trying to roll up on him like he had a weapon or something, right? He said, back down. Like, he really diffused that, like, back up. I'm not threatening anybody. I'm here at a public meeting. Right, so that's the kind of, in my opinion, small ways we resist individually, but collectively, right? When they start doing it, no, you can't do that to me. I'm here at a public meeting. I'm up here giving just my simple testimony, right? And so just because they don't like what I'm saying and they tell you to put your hands on me and remove me, I'm going to resist that.
Right.
That's not what we're going to do. And so I think that's also some of what we have to be prepared to do, right? And as he was saying, this book is to stand out.
Right. Small plug, and that's I think the impactfulness of Kenyan nonviolence, right? It is, and those moments, demonstrate that there is a way to resist nonviolently. There is a way to resist in love, right? Where, again, I can stand and, honor my humanity, right? Respect my humanity.
Yeah.
And so, now we can disagree, but don't feel like you have to destroy me physically,
That's right.
to do so. Yeah. And so, but now I want to go too fast, go too far too fast. But I think also this is a critique I have on the faith space. And I think this is where we have created a sense of complacency and passivism. Because we have created an environment, and I know folks may get mad at me, but I'm going to say it anyway. This phrase, well, God's on the throne. Yes, but God was on the throne in slavery. God was on the throne in Jim Crow. God was on the throne in black codes. There's never been a question about God being on the throne. The question is, will the heart of people respond to the heart of God?
Right.
And fight for humanity and stand for the oppressed and stand for the disenfranchised. And so now we have turned prayer into a sense of passivism. Well, we're going to pray, God's going to do something. No, throughout the text, it's been people who responded to God that stood.
With prayer, right?
With prayer.
It's both and.
Both and. David, when they left and went to battle, and they came back and they found their families had been kidnapped, and so they were mad at David. Like, David, had we not been gone with you, we could have been here to defend our people. David wouldn't pray. He said, God, look, they're trying to kill me. And God, what do I do? And then God said, go pursue. And so the thing is, and we learn from that and extract from that is prayer becomes an acquisition for a plan and how we pursue.
That's right. How
we go after change. We seek God's wisdom on how do we navigate where we are. It's not complacency. It's not passivism. It's not waiting for just something to happen magically.
Right.
But it's how we engage our faith in the fight for change. How do we stand for those who are disenfranchised? How do we move and address the issues that are affecting humanity? Because again, people are being harmed by this.
Right.
Yes.
So in this, when you were saying about David, I saw somebody post online. They said David didn't pray for Goliath. He killed his tail. And they ain't say tail.
Right.
But I was like, but to your point, right? Esther.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Her resistance. She said, you know
Yes.
what? Y'all go fast and pray.
Yep.
and I'm gonna go before the King. And if I perish, I perish.
That's right. That's right.
Right. So it's also this idea. So prayer should, to your point, prayer to gird us, give us that undergirding we need, so that we on the battlefield for our Lord. I'm a soldier in the army.
Come on.
Well, now soldiers fight.
Yes.
Right.
A battlefield is not in here; it's out there.
Right.
And when Paul says put on the whole armor, well, now you wouldn't need no armor
That's what I'm about.
if you just inside praying only, right?
Right.
So I think that, to your point, that's where we have to get outside of that and stop allowing, using faith as an a form of escapism, right? That we'll pray about it. God is on the throne, therefore,
Right.
I'm gonna go down in prayer, give my instructions. Harriet Tubman, when she used to pass out, I'm gonna get these instructions from God. Which way we going? This way.
Yeah.
Right. So to your point, that's what we have to get to, right? In the prayer, so that we don't make the wrong moves.
Right. Right.
So that
right.
God is with us in battle.
Right.
Right. And so we need more of that, in my opinion, and more thinking.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm sorry, Coach. I don't know.
Because I know last night at Bible study, the pastor preached a powerful sermon on Sunday, Game Over. And he was talking about the ways in which Jesus added to the commandment from Deuteronomy when he says, love God with your heart, soul, strength, and your mind. Yep. Like, we have to start loving God with our minds in ways that allow us to think critically, right? And to be able to hear from God in clear ways so we can develop strategy, where we can implement, where we have some kind of stick-to-itness, as my mother would say, to carry out the plan, right? That it's not going to happen overnight. It's not a sprint, right? As I say now, this slow work. Some people want to do that fast work, then some people do no work. But but this is slow work. We're talking. What they've been doing, this has been slow work.
Oh yeah.
This can just pop up and they doing this overnight.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something we have to know. How do we love God with our minds? And to your point, and that's to love your neighbor as yourself. He said the second one is unto this, right? Love your neighbor as yourself. And so what does it mean to love yourself right first?
Right.
And that goes to Micah, do justice. Well, first of all, do you live a just life? Or do you have justice with yourself? How do you love yourself? Because sometimes we can't love our neighbor right because we don't even love ourselves right. Now, we'll say we do. I'm blessed and highly favored. I'm doing all this praying and fasting. Some folks, I'm like, just go ahead and go to a buffet.
Right.
Right? Because you got to love yourself first. And that's an internal job, as Howard Thurman would say, right? You got to live live your inner life. What is it? Live your... I don't got. But I think it's something like you gotta live your inner life in the outward sanctuary, something like that. But essentially, Thurman is saying it's inside job first, outer life from the inward sanctuary.
Okay, there you go.
You gotta live your outer life from the inward sanctuary. I knew it would come back to me. I'm like, I know this sermon, but that's it. That's it, right?
Yeah.
That's the first step. So that's part of what we're seeing when you're saying they're destructive, they're maniacal, is pure evil. What they're doing. See, they don't love themselves. And I always tell people, at some point, we got to stop trying to prove that we're human. Right. That my humanity is worth you honoring. Right. That I have that divine spark in me. I want to turn that around and say, what makes you so inhumane? What about you that you've allowed that divine spark that's in you too? Because you're also a creation of God. But what about you has allowed you to feed that which is evil so much so we can't even see that divine spark in you? And then we got to start asking that, because that's a different set of questions. That gets you thinking a different kind of way. So me using my energy, just like I don't want to talk to white people about racism. No, y'all talk to each other. Right. It's not a black person's problem. Right. As much as we talk about racial justice, well, to me, we're going to talk about racial justice. Well, tell me what you're going to do to talk to your folks at Thanksgiving around that table. Your friends that you hang around with. Right. So I think, I think that's important. We got to love God with our minds so that we are not just spouting off and repeating things, or even scripture from sacred text.
Oh, yeah.
That we just have heard and not fully understanding what the text is really calling us to do.
Yeah. I think, and along with that, we also have to divorce ourselves from unhealthy theology.
Yes.
Because everything you mentioned is born out of that. We are taught to hate ourselves. We're taught to dislike ourselves. We're taught to demonize ourselves. We call ourselves wretched and and bad, and so we start out seeing ourselves in a negative light, right? I have a pastor friend of mine who has his worship team. They change the lyrics of songs. The song says, Jesus saved a wretch like me. Now they say, Jesus saved a friend like me.
That's good.
And so when you begin to see, you can see yourself different in this space, and then once you, again, so because it's hard to love yourself when you're singing, praying, and shouting over hating yourself. And so, and then I definitely can't love you if I don't love me, right? And then the part that we oftentimes talk over is that Jesus said, love God, neighbor yourself, but then he said the entire law and prophets hang on these two. Right?
Yeah.
And so that means everything that we are doing hangs on how we love God, love ourselves, and how we love our neighbor. That's it.
That is it.
And so to your point, I love how you said that. Let's have a conversation about what is it about you that makes you see me the way you see me. What do you struggle with? What are you challenged by in your own space and how you see yourself? And so now, but along with that though, I think also, I love how you mentioned mind. We have to also move away from this idea that intellect is a bad thing.
Right.
Like we have made intellectuality a sin. It's bad to be smart.
Yeah.
Like, wait a minute, no. If God was God enough to make the heavens and earth, then God can make a doctor, God can make a lawyer, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a scientist, which means that we have to have some intellectual fortitude to be in these spaces, which means God wants you to be a thinker. And here it is. And if we employ the idea that thinking is bad, then we will have willful ignorance and miss what's happening right now. So that's the problem we have. We aren't employing our thinking in this space, because you can just step back and just look at what's happening.
Yeah.
And you can recognize this ain't good.
This is not good.
This is dangerous.
Yes.
This is diabolical. This is unhealthy. But we have to employ some intellect, some thinking, some questioning. Be okay with asking questions in this space.
You have to ask questions, but more than asking questions, you have to have the right questions, because there's nothing worse than having the right answer to the wrong question.
Right.
So that's something we have to lean into. But you can only do that through thinking.
Right.
And reading books.
Right.
And getting information. And I think also it's this idea of when we're in church. Well, let me say it this way. So Dr. Wright, I love how he says thinking people need to pray more and praying people need to think more. Right. So we got to get that real healthy balance of the both ends. This is why sometimes you can hear folks saying, well, when I go to church, I don't want to hear about what's going on in the world. I come to worship God. But the reality is the God you worship in the Bible you read, as we always say, outside of the brief reign of King David, he was always dealing with his folks who were under oppression.
Always.
So they're always looking for God, how we get up out of this. Right? And in the interim, God also critiqued those who became complicit in the oppression of the people. Right? You have the prophets. This is what the prophets are saying to sometimes the people of God who are forgotten, right? Of the God who brought you out.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the other part we have to really get back to and push back against, even when people say that. I don't want to hear about it. Well, let me tell you, the God you serve cares about your life between Sundays. And the reality is they care too when it happens to them personally. Right. And so,
yeah, it's interesting because we come to church, by and large, in this country for an escape from reality.
Yeah.
Right? And you used the word earlier, escapism. We're trying to get to heaven. And when you actually step back and look at the text, it was never about heaven.
Right.
It was about how we engage and how we treat each other, how we treat God's creation, how we love, how we free the oppressed. And so I think we have to reconsider how we look at engaging worship. Do we engage worship with the idea of trying to escape from the reality that we live in? Or do we engage worship with the idea of a place of community and connectivity and training and development on how I deal with my reality?
Yeah.
Right? How do I take this faith message, internalize it, breathe it, and live it? So on Monday morning, I know how to handle the realities of misogyny and sexism, racism, oppression, democracy. How do I use my faith to engage in a healthy way that brings about change and transformation? And so, to your point, it's not just about a selfishness, and the entire text is communal. When you
Yeah, and I think to your point, it's also how do you manage those things. But see, it's also I think we have I don't say disembodiment. It's not the word I want to use, but we have a disassociation of understanding, even in our own households. Like our families are systems.
right.
So
right.
even if you have an understanding that those systems also can be a part of the dysfunction in a family structure, right? What creates people to behave the way they do. Socialization process, so we can't even disconnect it from that. So it's also individually, right? Because sometimes people only know individualism. So in that regard, you also got to see that as it's not even just about you, even in your own household. Again, justice. How we have right relationships with one another in this household.
Yes.
What has caused the break.
That's right.
And whatever that break is, trace that back to, is there some soul trauma attached to that has not been healed? Is there some childhood trauma that has not been healed? And so I'm saying that our families are also systems that we also have to address and correct as well. And we look to God to do that too. TOO, right? And so I think we just got to if we begin to see it that way, then we can see the ways in which justice is critical on every level.
That's right.
And it becomes a part of who we are, which should make it an easier move to then go beyond yourself and see justice outside the home, et cetera, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's really creating, what King argued as the beloved community. How do we exist humanely everywhere? The idea of the world house, right?
That's right.
We are all part of one. So which should help us understand institutions, because our family is an institution.
That's right.
The church
That's
is an
right.
institution.
That's right.
Right. So we're preserving a space that's supposed to lift up humanity, people. Right. And so I think that's probably part of the danger, kind of coming full circle with the idea of where we are now with the country. We should run things more like a business. Okay. Our country was created the way it is for a reason, because it's not about profit. It's about people. And so Medicaid is about people. Healthcare is about people. And so we have to look at the fact that there's a huge variance there.
Oh yeah.
Right. And then along with that, when you look at the undercurrent, and I gotta say this, who's mostly impacted by the noise that's happening right now? Who has been the largest employer of African Americans? The federal government has.
That's how we became middle class. That's how our middle class was created, through unions and auto factories and the government.
Yeah. And so we have to look at who are the victims in this space, right? And now, marriage. So if I'm thinking about this thing, and I see this thing, I marry what's happening with my faith that should encourage me to be concerned with what's happening with humanity. And I'm thinking about the strategy that they've employed to do this thing. And that means I have to critique and correct something in the environment, because this strategy is hurting God's creation, who I'm supposed to love while I love myself. So then we have to do something to address the issue and the harm that's being brought upon God's creation and upon humans, people.
Yeah, and then sometimes we just got to tell the folks straight up what this means. When they do this, when you go get your food stamps, you're not going to have it.
Yep.
Right? Like the woman who had the meltdown, she was like, how am I going to feed my kids? See, for some of you got to put it right there in their lap.
Yeah. Yeah.
This has going to directly impact your household.
That's right.
Food going to be less. Your access to health care is going to be less. Like, I think so. Sometimes, too, to your point, I think in the praying and doing, it is also how we say, well, this is how it's going to impact you. Like, we got to be real clear about it, but that requires us to be able to think, interpret data, right, and then be able to give that to our people in ways that is digestible.
Right.
Like, we have to do that. So speaking of that, one of the things I want to talk about just very briefly, because one thing you said that America is about being ran as a business, but we are to look at that as we're people. I mean, it's less the government of the people, for the people, by the people, right? But we also know that this country is very capitalistic, hyper-capitalistic.
Right.
So one of the things people are calling for, is everybody's doing their version of how to resist, how to withhold their dollars, to show their disapproval of diversity, equity, inclusion being excluded now and really being dismantled in some of these spaces where it didn't even apply to them. Like it was about the government, but then you a corporation because you're probably getting some kind of, government contracts or you're getting some kind of support. And then some probably like, oh, this is a good opportunity for us we don't really believe in this anyway. So we're going to get rid of it.
Right.
So, tomorrow, February 28th, right, it's economic blackout, right? So, of course, there's a lot of people like, is this effective? What is it going to yield? So I want to get your feedback on that. But for me, I look at, yes, they understand money. I do agree with that. I believe one thing this country understands is messing with money. Now, I don't know how effective a one-day boycott is because first of all, the Montgomery bus boycott was like fourth on the list when you look at how our folks strategized around of dealing with, the lack of access to public accommodations, et cetera. So 381 days, they stayed off the buses.
Yep.
Now, they didn't start off saying we're going to stay off 381 days. They start off saying until we break the back of this economic system in Montgomery. It just lasted that long. The wife was like, okay, the city was going to be bankrupt.
That's right. That's right.
Had the buses not kept running.
That's right.
So I'm not saying we shouldn't do the blackout. I'm going to be a part of it, right? Because I do believe in collective, activism and work. But I'm also saying we got to have don't have no end date. It's until we get the change we're looking for. So that's just my take on tomorrow. And I just wondered how are some of the ways in which we think like that. So we're lifting up the Montgomery bus boycott, but again, that was like fourth down on the strategy. And when they did it, it was a strategy behind it, and it wasn't a set date. It was like we gonna withhold our money until.
That's right. That's right.
And it's sacrifice built into that. Now I know we're much more advanced than then we have much more options and. You don't shop here, you may impact, minority businesses there. Like, I get the nuance. It's not the same, but so just your feedback on that. That's just my thing. It's like, how can we begin to have something where we don't have an end to it? We're like, we're going to do this and sacrifice. Because in that, just like they built the alternative transportation system, because I always talk about what if they had maintained that and just got their own buses, but I don't judge. Everybody does the work in their particular, the time we find ourselves in.
Right.
And our job is to look back, Sankofa, grab that which is useful for us to know what we might do differently to push us further along. So I'm not critiquing it in that way. I'm critiquing it in a way that I think is healthy and not saying they should have done X, Y, Z. Yeah. But I'm saying that, but alternative thing was created. Yeah. Right? Georgia Gilmore made that club from nowhere. Served them chicken dinners, been able to pay the insurance and the gas to keep the cars going, to maintenance on there. So I'm saying that in some ways, what are we doing to look more long term? Yeah. And since we'll get your feedback on how you feel about it.
No, I agree. I think that again, variance, 381 days, right? There was a commitment to change, and the impact, of course. You already mentioned that the boycott almost sent the city into bankruptcy, which again, they responded to how they were impacted. Again, the money was impacted. And that's kind of been the history of this country.
That's right.
You mess with the money, and then things are not going to happen. But so I do agree. Same here. I know I'll be a part of it. I've asked my church, my church member friends and all that. Yes. So now, but I will say this though. I do agree that we need to have a long-term strategy beyond tomorrow. And I think that and that really speaks to what we've been sharing the entire time is how they have been playing this long-term game. This has been a long-term strategy for them. And I think for us, what happened even after the bus boycott, after the VRA, after the CRA, we got comfortable. We got complacent. Okay, wow, now we have access to their schools. Wow, now we can move to the suburbs. Now we have access. And so we thought we made it. And then we had Obama as president. Oh, wow, we're there. And so we got real comfortable. We stopped strategizing. And then, but the entire time, they were planning and plotting on the other end. So they had a long-term game in mind. Right. And so I think for us, beyond tomorrow, let's be thinking about how do we move beyond tomorrow. Now, again, Now we are in a whole different landscape now.
Right.
Because back then they didn't have to contend with social media. And they have to contend with echo chambers the way we do now.
Right.
And so we have to be much more creative and strategic in how we move in this space. But there has to be something that we do that's multi-pronged, multifaceted, and that can meet people where they are, where they understand the necessity, where we're going. And we really have to employ, information gathering, education. I got to say these things because folks don't know and recognize, by and large, what's happening.
Right.
And so we have to help people get there, but then have a plan and a long-term strategy.
Yeah, so man, the hour has gone by quickly once again. Thank you, Reverend Madison, for being here on today. As always, very good conversation, dialogue, and I hope that something was said or some things were said that, one, if it clarifies for some people, maybe for others, I'm going to go read some more, get more information, and spread it, right, to share this episode so people can kind of get a sense of what they need to be aware of.
Yes, absolutely.
And where we are in this moment and how you have to resist and not give your power over, how you have to defend our institutions, right? How you have to turn the TV off and you have to actually read a book. I know TikTok, universities, other things happen to give you a quick thing, but nothing is going to replace reading and digesting that for yourself, right? So that has to be done. In our churches, certainly, there are many who do great work, and many more of us need to do more work, making sure we educate our congregation and community, right, on what's at stake and what's going on, what we have the power to do. Because we have a lot of power that we can use in order to resist. And I say not just resist, but create our own pockets of liberation at the same time. Because you can't tell me our folks who had absolutely nothing. Mary McLeod Bethune took that dollar and whatever cent she had, and Bethune-Cookman College still stands, right? So it's just about, do we have the will, and do we have, but in the political will in this moment too, right? To say we're going to go forward. This is what we're going to do. We thought about it. We strategized about it, and hopefully not doing it over social media. Like, this is really underground work. This should be work that we're doing and meeting in places nobody knows where we're meeting.
Right.
I don't have to put on social media, hey, y'all want to come to this meeting, meet me here. No. I'm going to talk to you one-on-one. Show up here. I need you here. Because some of this has to be that kind of work, right? Yeah. And then just like Project 2025, when you are already in motion, you don't care who's reading it.
Right.
That's how tough. By the time we got it and you downloading and reading it, it's already in motion.
Oh, yeah.
So I think we have to.
Because they were meeting in secret.
Is it right? Because and it's also not even in secret as much as they have institutions. We have people employed doing this research. They writing this document. It's just they see the value.
Right.
And we need to see the value. If I tell people, hey, we're going to start this, and I'm sure we have pockets of policy institutes, but we don't know where we are.
Right.
Right. But if I were to ask somebody, give me $5 reoccurring gift to go toward this work where somebody's going to be researching, writing, but also thinking critically, producing, documents, producing strategy for us to implement. Can I count on your $5 just because you're not getting something in return, right? You're not getting the drink, you're not getting the mug. You're just but you believe your money is worth.
That's right.
Investing in not just your future, but those futures that are to come generations to come. And we got to see they see the value in that. That is clear through the family. That's still going strong. Right. So they're doing that through their institutions. So we got to support our institutions financially.
Absolutely.
And not just through word, but it takes money in order to do this work. So thank you again for being here, Reverend Madison.
Thank you.
We're super excited to have you. So just two quick things we've been talking about for the past 3 weeks. One, you can always support Fannie Lou's Classroom by purchasing your T-shirt. If you're on a device outside of your phone, you can scan that QR code to take you directly to our link, or you can go to friendshipwest.org to our Justice landing page, and you'll also see the opportunity to purchase your shirt straight from our website. And then lastly, again, we are still gearing up. We're super excited about going to Austin. I said we got a mini DC in Austin where, supermajority in the Texas legislature, where they are really rushing through a lot of bills on the Senate side, school vouchers, reduction in Medicaid, Medicare, like all of that is being pushed through so quickly on the Senate side. But if nothing else, I keep telling folks, go to Austin and still resist, right? You have to show them this is not okay. And I think we're starting to see people starting to do that more and more, showing up in spaces, and we have to do that. So we're going down to Austin March 16th, 17th, and 18th. It is 3 days. On Sunday, it's a welcome dinner. Monday, we're going to have a rally so we can really talk about our legislative priorities, what's important to us, and we're calling it Family Matters because we're going to reclaim that language, right? Just like we got to really reclaim evangelical because they done turned into something bad in terms, right? Because it's attached to the right-wing evangelicals who are really anti-Christianity, right? They Christians against Christianity, to use Aubrey Hendricks' words, right? White Christians against Christianity. So family matters, like how they identify. Oh, we got family values, and we're going to redefine that. Family means this to us. So it's kind of like family matters, and it's also we got some family matters we need to discuss, right? So I think we want to invite people to be a part of that. I want you to be a part of that. Monday's the rally. Then we're going to have a session where we're going to talk about, give some historical background, because I think history is important for people to understand why you're here, why it's important to be here, but also how our faith in public life is really critical in this moment. And then from there, we'll move to legislative training, where you will learn how to speak to legislators about your issue. We're going to have an update on the bills that are currently going through, hopefully committee, or bills that have been filed that we think are going to make it to committee and possibly make it to the Senate and the House floor. And then we'll give you the opportunity to do legislative drop-ins, to drop down, one-pagers for your legislators to kind of say, here are the issues important to me as your constituent. But we're also going to have some of the targeted legislators who may not represent us, but we feel can be a good, strong ally in terms of what our positions are in terms of our legislative priorities. So that's 16th, 17th, and 18th. If you can't make all 3 days, no problem. Sign up, register, and just come on Monday. Monday is our major day where we'll have a full day of really being engaged and you making your voice heard and being seen in the place. And like I say, when we leave Austin this session, despite what oppressive, overreaching laws that pass, we can say our DNA, right, is on the Capitol. We were there. We did not take it, and we did not concede in advance.
Right.
But we believe in defending this institution, this really fragile experiment called a democracy. There's only been a racial democracy for 60 years. So it's still young, right? But we want to do what we can to defend that because our people were a part of, the sacrifice to kind of push this country toward democracy. So thank you for being here on this edition of Fannie Lou's Classroom. Buy your T-shirt, go online, support us, and meet us in Austin and be with us, if nothing else, on Monday, March 17th. We'll see you next week, 12 o'clock noon.